Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and a very warm welcome to all of you to another series of our thought leadership session. We do this every last Thursday of the month. Interweave is a professional diversity consulting organization that offers a range of services to help organizations foster diversity, equity, and inclusion at the workplace. Interweave's services includes a suite of offering in posh DEI consulting, audits, women leadership programs offered in form on training, e-learning, art, and theater. You can reach out to us at meeta@interweave.in or visit our website www.interweave.in for any help, info on our offerings. You can also follow us on our social media platforms for our upcoming events and programs. Before we get into today's session, please write your questions in the comment section. There is a CC closed caption available on all the three platforms. Please enable or disable them as per your need. Today's discussion on same sex marriage and implication on corporate India is moderated by Ruchira Gokhale. She's Head Consulting Solutions and Interweave Consultants. Welcome, all of you, and over to you, Ruchira.
Thank you so much, Mitch, and very good afternoon, everyone who's joined us today. We welcome you once again to our Thought Leadership series with this very, very important panel discussion. First off, a very happy Pride Month. As we come to a close of yet another eventful, purposeful Pride Month, it's good to take stock of where we are on the LGBTQIA plus rights and what the upcoming milestones look like. The latest, of course, being the marriage equality debate that is raging as much in the Supreme Court as it is on social media and perhaps even in our drawing room conversations. While corporates may not be comfortable stepping into this conversation at this point of time, they are well aware that the outcome will impact them at many levels. As Interweave, we would like to use today's conversation to unpack the key elements of this debate, as well as get a sense about the social as well as workplace implications. The two panelists that I have with me today are without doubt the right people to be having this discussion with. Their authenticity and their advocacy of LGBTQIA plus rights is inspirational. Our first panelist, Mihir, is a practicing lawyer and an ardent LGBTQIA plus rights activist and goes by the pronouns he, his. Our second panelist, Suresh, manages learning and talent development at Publicit Sapient and goes by the pronouns he, his. They both bring unique experiences, perspectives, and learnings which we hope to benefit from in today's discussion. Welcome, Suresh, and welcome, Mihir.
Thank you, Ruchira.
All right, so before I begin, I just want to put it out there that we would like for this to be a psychologically safe space where views are shared in a trusting, respectful manner. And all of those listening in, take care to not quote anything outside of context and not out anyone without their permission. So, with that, Mihir, we have to absolutely begin with you. So, there's just so much of conversation around this topic. There's so much of, there isn't complete really awareness or comprehension. So, would you please help us understand, in simplified legal parlance, what exactly is the equal marriage debate about and what is its current status?
Okay, that's a pretty complex task you've given me, particularly because it was 3 weeks of arguments before the Supreme Court. But I will try to kind of simplify and give you the bullet points. But basically, you take this as a follow-up to what happened in 2018, which was the culmination of 2 decades, at least 2 decades of work, which challenged the criminalization associated with sexual activity between consenting adults in the community. So in 2018, in the Navdeep Singh Johar judgment, the court said that you cannot associate criminal punishment with sexual relationships and relationships between consenting adults amongst the community. it doesn't say, there are references to recognition of relationships amongst queer individuals, but of course, because at that time marriage was not a question before the court, it doesn't answer or discuss the issue of marriage. You see after that many young couples facing very extreme violence from their families and having to run to other states and get protection, approach the high courts, etc., and really have to fight to be able to live their lives themselves and also to live with their partners of their choice. The same marriage cases actually start in Kerala and the Delhi High Court, where basically a number of couples went and raised issues. So the two sets of cases which have come up. One is same-sex couples, so a gay couple or a lesbian couple, and a varied number that come to the laws which were invoked later. And the other were couples which involved trans individuals. So in that sense, we're sort of not talking only of same-sex marriages, but marriage equality as a sort of broader concept. So the basic idea fundamentally are two or three things. One is that the peg is equality. So basically, that if there is an institution which is not just a social institution, a religious institution, there's an institution which is framed by law. There are many laws which recognize marriage. Why is it that queer relationships and people who are from the community are kept out of that institution? So that is discrimination on the face of it, uh, on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity. So that's the first kind of broad argument. The second is that actually marriage brings with it a number of socio-economic rights. So you're able to kind of plan your finances together, you're able to plan a family together, you're able to adopt children, excuse me, you're able to plan your taxes, succession, estate planning. There are many things which follow. And by not being able to get married, queer people are excluded from all of those options. And the third sort of broad, I'm really sort of giving you the broad kind of areas of argument, is that for many individuals, not being able to get married kind of renders their relationship in quite a state of uncertainty and leaves them very unsafe because for many queer individuals, they're at odds with their family. And so, marriage as safety, as an umbrella, as a sort of protective shield, is also one of the central points raised within the cases. Now, as you might know, because of course many of our listeners might be married themselves, marriage is a very complicated legal issue in India because we have personal laws. So, you have the Hindu Marriage Act, which applies to marriage between two Hindus. You have the Christian Marriage Act, where at least one person must be a Christian. Then you have Muslim personal law, quite a lot of which is uncodified, but applies to marriages involving Muslims, and so on and so forth. There's other laws relating to Parsis, and it basically revolves a lot around religious practices, and some of them have then been codified. Now, law, of course, you remember the hierarchy. The constitution is the supreme, and then all law must be in compliance with that. I'll come back to that, but that's one of the central sort of important discussions that are taking place. But in India, we're also quite lucky because we have the Special Marriage Act. And the Special Marriage Act has a very interesting history, which I won't go into now, but it was discussed in great detail in the court. But basically, it allows people of different religions to get married. And it, in that sense, has a secular notion to it. And it makes it a lot neater in terms of the claims that were being made to recognize relationships which were not traditional, so to speak. So, irrespective of whether religions recognize your relationship, a secular law should. And so, very early on in the case, the court actually decides not to look at religious personal law, even though many petitions had raised claims challenging, Hindu law, etc. And they said we will focus on the secular law. So the central challenge is basically to say that the secular law, the Special Marriage Act, and the Foreign Marriage Act, I'll come to the Foreign Marriage Act a little bit later, are unconstitutional if they don't recognize relationships between two men, marriages between two men or two women, or involving trans persons. That's fundamentally what the case was about. Uh, the Special Marriage Act used to, I'll wrap up this sort of broad summary of the case, but the Special Marriage Act used to recognize marriages both where both were in India or where one of the partners was abroad or both partners were from India but were living abroad. But in the late 60s, they separated out the two laws. And so then this Foreign Marriage Act came into being, where if you're living abroad and you get married, uh, that marriage also should be available. I should be recognized in India, but you have the option of then registering your marriage in India, and it's recognized in India. But because same-sex marriages are not recognized in India, that option is also not available. So you had a number of couples who were living abroad. I represented one of them, a lesbian couple based in Germany. They want to come back. They left because the legal environment and the social environment was so hostile to them as a queer couple. They want to come back to India but live as a family, live together as a couple who's recognized with a valid marriage. But they can't because they're married abroad, but the marriage is not recognized in India. And so they want to come back, but come back as a married couple. And they had challenged the Special Marriage Act, basically saying that the Constitution guarantees certain rights, and till the right to marriage is not recognized in these laws, those laws are incompatible with the Constitution.
Thank you so much, Mihir. That's a great attempt at bringing down something so complex. So, what I'm also hearing you say is that this act will have implications across many other laws, and that could also be a consideration that's adding to the complexity. It's not just about this in silo being legalized, but there is a lot of other laws also, all those that you mentioned that will get impacted as well, right? Okay.
So that's actually sorry for coming back in, but I
No,
think
no,
that that's a
sure.
very crucial question because one of
Yeah.
the responses, the opposition, we had tremendous opposition from the government, and one of their lines of argument is that the court is not suited to do this. That actually Parliament is the sole authority to do it because one is that there's a sort of social sanction to marriage, and that's not existing. That's one of the arguments they had. But the second argument that they felt was that many consequences flow from marriage: the right to adopt, inheritance,
Correct.
what happens to a spouse, etc., and
Correct.
that has to be resolved. And so you did see some concern in the questions from the court when they were asking us questions. So what happens to certain things? Uh, so you're right that there are many consequences on
Yeah.
law. If you say you find that no, the Special Marriage Act must recognize queer relationship, it does impact other laws, and that is a
Correct.
central concern raised by the central government as well.
Okay. All right. That's so helpful. I mean, there's so much new that I learned in just in the last few minutes that you spoke. So thank you so much. And on the social element that you brought up, I'm going to come to you, Suresh. And Suresh, as a pet parent myself, pets are most welcome to let themselves be heard on our panel discussions. So you're most welcome to let that happen. So, Suresh, I'm going to bring this to you more from your own lived experience or the experience that you have with people who identify as LGBTQI+. What is the social relevance of the queer community having equal marriage rights, and how does it play out on a day-to-day basis?
Um, firstly, as a person who is in a relationship and, wanting this to, be recognized itself is a big thing, right? So for me, like everybody else, you see all my friends and a lot of them, have a acceptance or a recognition of their, relationship per se. Right now, we really don't have that. We kind of say that yes, we are a couple and we kind of going out there, but what next, right? Because again, from context of where we are from as India, we've celebrated, people who are in love together. So irrespective, so the recognition or the identification itself came from a, though it was very cis oriented, very heterosexual oriented, but then the queer people also who were very much in the closet that time thought that yes, we can have a relationship probably in the future and time to come. And now when we do have that opportunity, right? So what next? Right, be it like what Mihir said, be it with joint accounts and having the opportunity to go ahead and have a say in places like even hospitals when we're not sick, when we are sick, and there is some sort of you know um, decision that needs to be made. Right now, we really don't have that. Even going ahead and buying a house or anything that we have to do together as a couple is not possible. Basic things of insurance is not really there. So, if we want to really do something as a couple, or couples out there in India as well, we really don't have that out there. So I think for me, even the basic nuances of a day to day telling people that we are a couple, is coming out to them on a day-to-day basis, because we need that. We want that to kind of, happen. So I feel from that perspective, having same-sex marriage rights is something that we want as people from the queer community. Yes, now we've got the Section 377 off. So there is recognition of the LGBTQ plus community people, which is great. But what about people who are in love, who are in relationships for the longest time possible? How to legitimize that and then take that forward is something, yeah, that's what everybody is now fighting for. And, Mihi said so many points about what conversations are happening. The basic marriage itself, which we think is very easy, but it is complicated from a law perspective. But for us, it see how much more tougher it gets, because there is so much of discrimination that happens. As gay men, it is the hurdles are a little less compared to lesbian couples, right? As women who are in a relationship with themselves, as with another woman, then the complications gets really doubled. You beat simple things of even getting a house together, right? It is not easy. We had to search a lot to get houses, and then we have to let them know that this is who we are, and then the the battle continues, the conversation continues, discrimination continues at various levels and all forms. Even if the owner is fine, then there is issues with people around, right? If there is some sort of legalization of relationships, I think that would really help. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely hear you. I think that would help tremendously, because what you said was really powerful. I mean, as a married couple, you don't have to keep coming out on a daily basis. You are married and that's it. It just then equals so many other things. But for you, it would
Right.
be, it would be really difficult and complicated. I mean, yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And Suresh, I'm just going to bring another some question to you, but that's more from an organization perspective, to say, what are some ways in which inclusive organizations can continue to support same-sex couples regardless of equal marriage law coming into place or not, and maybe even address some of the challenges that you spoke about just now?
Well, I think inclusive organizations, I think even before Section 377 coming in, a lot of organizations had done their part in, treating their employees irrespective of where they're from, and especially if they're from the LGBTQ plus community, giving them certain, benefits and things like that, even recognizing, having those BRGs or ERGs, setting them up to make people understand. I think that needs to go really further up. If it's same-sex couples, the same-sex partner benefits is something that would be definitely encouraged, and we do have that at my organization. So those are that first step that you really need to take forward in recognizing or even helping or supporting queer couples, right? And then I would say a lot more aspects can go into it, but the needs are very different. See, because again, just in 2018, we had Section 377 going away. Organizations are getting to understand. A lot of organizations are really getting to understand, even start having conversations on, the basics of LGBTQ plus community people. Now, in the meantime, there are already queer people who are in a relationship. So how can we go ahead and bring that conversation on board? Is again by sensitizing people around the fact that yes, it's just not an individual. It's also about who they love, who they are with. So I would go on to go ahead and say that use languages which are very appropriate, which are very neutral, gender agnostic, and also at the same time inclusive, right? Instead of saying bring in your husbands or bring in your wives and all of that, say partner, use languages which can, which are very welcoming, right? And I think more importantly, because this is evolving in the sense of people understanding, right, about the queer community, I think ask those specific couples, what is it that they need? Right? Because I'm sitting here as a privileged man per se, right? Saying that I do have basic necessities or certain things that I can take care of, right? But what if that those needs are really not available? I can, organizations need to be open enough to understand and incorporate some of those needs, right? I'm going to give an example of, somebody as a lesbian couple who's not is not from the metros, right, but is coming to a metro, and they're kind of sharing the fact that they are a queer couple. And how can organizations help them is by probably supporting them, providing them, the basic infrastructure that they need in some form or the other, right, and giving them some sort of legal, support from an organization perspective, right? But
Right,
like what
right.
we said, there's a lot of threats happening, a lot of discrimination, a lot of harassment, violence happening. How can we, as organized, if they are an employee of, a specific organization, then help them out with that. Provide them any support, be it with counseling, mental health support. All of
Right.
that, can be provided, and it needs to be ask, and what they need. There could be various aspects which probably I'm not thinking right now, but the best question is ask them what do they
Yeah.
need from an organization perspective that can help them, to be themselves and focus more on work, right? That's the whole idea and intent.
Yeah, thank you. And Mihir, is there anything you would like to add to what inclusive organizations can do to support same-sex couples while the Marriage Act is not in place yet?
So, look, I would say that the organizations I advise, I always say let's not wait for the law to catch up. So there
Yeah.
are certain things where you can take steps, irrespective of what the law mandates you to do or not. And as Suresh said, many organizations had done it even when 677 was in place, and I think it's possible to do. But you get a range of organizations. Some are quite
Yeah.
conservative and will only go by what they have to do, and some are
Right.
willing to experiment. So I think that's one big thing, that you can extend many of your policies which exist for heterosexual couples, married couples, to people who are in stable relationships but cannot get married. And so that's
Yeah.
a fairly kind of straightforward, immediate thing that you can intervene and do. There are other legal requirements that one has to follow for trans people, which have been set out in the Transgender Persons Act. So that's a separate sort of consideration that one might do. I think the third thing I'd like to just flag quickly is that to acknowledge that there's a certain level of messiness for queer people in their lives, and that could mean that the police could be at your office, or the family could be at your office and make a fuss.
Yeah.
Nobody really likes it. The employee themselves would hate it. You don't want to be seen as somebody with this huge kind of family dispute going on, and family which disapproves of you. And of course the organization will not like this kind of chaos or disruption in their workplace, but that is the reality of many queer individuals. And so in that sense, being a little bit flexible and understanding and supportive in those contexts, that's very useful.
Yeah, that's very powerful. Thank you for that. And I'm also going to, then, because you talked about safety, I'm going to bring this to both of you. Mir, maybe you could go first. An important aspect is protection and safety, like you brought up as well for same-sex couples. Now, if and hopefully when the same sex marriage were to be legalized, in case of backlash from certain sections of the society what are the legal avenues for protection, and what can organizations and allies do to keep impacted people safe in that place?
Right. So this is, of course, a constant concern for many couples, and
Right.
it's a concern that even pre-marriage exists today, because, as I mentioned, for many people who've come out, one of the families, sometimes or both families, disapprove and are willing to go to many lengths to break up the couple. That could include filing false cases, pursuing them with the police, pursuing them with male members of the family who are willing to be violent. And for the case itself, it's not something that we were unaware of. So we raised it in the Supreme Court, basically saying that uh, if you are to agree with us, you must also think about how couples can be protected. And so
Absolutely.
there are cases, for example, where the Supreme Court has gone into very detailed guidelines for intercaste couples where Khap Panchayats disapproved. And so they've set out what are the responsibilities of the district administration, the police, etc., etc. And we said that that also has to be done here. So that was one, sort of on the broader government kind of level of responsibility. The other thing is that the Special Marriage Act actually requires a public notice of marriage for 30 days. And that we said is unconstitutional because it puts queer people at risk of being attacked. So if you do have to put up a notice at the registrar's office and some busybody sees it, and of course it can be quite organized monitoring what happens at the registrar's office, and calls your parents and lets them know, then you're very vulnerable to attack. And so that actually the mechanism of the law itself renders you vulnerable. And so that's one part of the law that some petitioners challenged in addition, basically saying that they will not be able to access the institution of marriage unless this public notice goes. So those are the sort of policy considerations that we had raised before the court. But I think for organizations, that there are some things that they could do, and I think that is to treat the details, the contact details of their queer employees as confidential. Very often, parents try to get information, and most organizations do treat it as a matter of course. They treat contact information as private and confidential. Then the other thing is that I have seen organizations have been quite strict about families entering the premises, sometimes quite strict with the police also to ask for paperwork when the police is demanding contact information, when the person came last, etc. And um, excuse me, I think that has also been very useful because if an organization is clued into what's happening, then you're not supporting somebody resisting the police. That's not what we're saying. We're not saying help a kind of a fugitive runaway. No, it's basically saying don't let the person be unsafe when they're working in your office. They will deal with the case, they will have lawyers, and they will deal with it as appropriate. But basically, you having to come to office and the formality that it brings with it, where you have the disclosures of where you live and how you can contact, should not render you vulnerable to your family.
Okay, important considerations. Thank you, Mihir. Suresh, what would you want to add there from a safety
Uh,
perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with whatever Mia had said. I think certain points are again, as organizations, how can they support? If they know about it, then I think, like I spoke about the fact of, taking care of the mental health, like how can you put them in touch with counselors and how can, try and ease up the workload possible because it's a tough situation, tough time for an individual, knowing the fact that they would not be able to go ahead and do their best, work their best. So how is it that they can really help? If need be, give them leaves as well to process through this situation, and any policies or back end support that they can provide. I think they need to look at avenues on how to do that, like not taking this as an issue case, but taking it as a case with compassion to help and support them. I think like whatever he said about the way information is being provided is confidential, if that itself is taken care of, then I think asking that individual if they want to share this information with so and so people, then yes, please do that. If not, do not. Because they're doing it and abiding by that, that kind of gives that confidence that the organization is also very much supportive, though the laws are really not there yet. With the current situation, then what better they can really do, or even take them to a safe location if that is something that they can willing to put forth and go forward, because whatever their current place itself is not safe, right?
Yeah.
It could be anywhere. It could be the company premises, a hotel, or anything of that sort, that where they can be safe and be in a proper
Yeah.
state of mind as well.
Yeah. So organizations have to embrace themselves to go a little bit further in really providing safety and protection
Yeah,
to employees. You can't just say this is all that we can do. I
true.
think it's really time where organizations risk themselves a little bit more to keep people from the community safe.
Also
And
look at all the legal aspects as well, from their
mm,
perspectives, to make sure that they are in the right, because as an organization, they want to do that as well, right? So we
yeah,
need to make sure that we are also informing, as queer people, we are also informing them, letting them know everything, openly.
mm,
People who are listening to it, if you're from, the queer community, if you also have friends or people or in relationships, it's always good to talk about it, share, so that the organization can also look at how they can support fully, right? No half
yeah,
information, and they're coming by surprise, and they wouldn't be aware on how to go about with this. So it is, I think, both
yeah,
ways. If you are open as an individual from the LGBTQ plus community and talking about it, there's an opportunity also to understand, assess, get as many opinions per se to go ahead and help them out.
yeah, yeah. That's very important, Suresh, because it is, if you are out to at least someone in the organization, someone of certain significance, then at least the organization is prepared to support, a little bit more prepared to support you in that time of need, whenever that might be. And Mir, I'm going to just come back on similar lines to say that currently we continue to live in unequal marriage rights times, and there are, like you also mentioned, Suresh mentioned, there are people getting impacted on a daily basis. So would you be able to guide the audience to certain helpful resources that they could turn to, either as impacted community members or as allies wanting to support someone who is impacted?
Right. So I would say yes, there are very good organizations in many states in India, and many of them put out very good information uh, for people to read, whether they are from the community directly. I mean, that's separate kinds of information, and there's also information there for people who are allies or maybe parents of people who've just come out, or organizations wanting to start. And you could think of Nazaria in Delhi, Sappho in West Bengal. Um, there's Orinum, which is hosted in Hyderabad, etc. There are some drop-in meetings where you can do, which are also in Bangalore, etc., where you can meet people from the community. Uh, and I would say that a lot of the organizations also put out information about how you can support. And there's a very thriving set of parents of queer people who are in Bombay and in Delhi, and we work with them very closely, because sometimes before going to court or the police, we try less sort of confrontational measures, and sometimes conversations between parents do help. And so that's also been very useful for us. And they are very active. They meet very regularly, discuss issues that they're facing, and look to sensitize other parents and groups. Uh, Apart from that, there are many very active groups on social media, and they're putting out great information on what's happening in the community in different cities, developments around the world. And I think those are also like Yes, We Exist India, which kind of came up I think when arguments were being made against Section 377 being read down, and so a lot of community organizing has taken place, and so those resources are available online. I'm happy to make a list and maybe share some of them if people are interested.
Sure, sure. That's helpful. Thank you. And my next question is again to both of you. Maybe Suresh, you could come in first on this. For a cisgender, heterosexual individual, marriage can often be a privilege that they are absolutely blind to. So then, how can the cishet community get more aware of this privilege and also become more intentional of their support and allyship, especially in this context that we are discussing today?
Uh, See, yeah, I mean, when you say often privilege, I think it is a privilege for the cis het people, because I think anything and everything is a celebration for them, right? Be marriage perspective and all of that. How can they be more mindful? Is with the fact of embracing, welcoming people, for me, be anybody, like be it at work, be it outside as well. Getting to just understand what are the nuances that from the LGBT plus community people face, and especially queer people. Now, like what me said, that yes, there are a lot of people coming out, and there are a lot of conversations happening. So a lot of queer people are also coming out and talking about these issues, right? So getting a better understanding, and the allies themselves getting to be a part of some of these conversations, events, all of that, to gain a better understanding so that they will know what that they can really just end out of this, right? So be an active ally for queer couples as well. How is it that they can support? How is it that they can, step forward and say, no, that this is what we need to do, irrespective, right? Because you're talking about just queer couples, there is a little more understanding. But if you become an ally for the LGBTQ plus community, by default, you will start getting to know this information as well, right?
Yeah.
About the issues that we face, what are the troubles, be it from the basics like even housing, travel,
Mm.
anything of that sort. How can you be a part of that process, accompany, help, and support them, and take it to the next level? I think that's where I would say allyship comes in. Privileges, for me, I always think about this, personal example of a dear friend of mine who invited us, me and my partner, to their wedding, as a couple. So they informed everybody that, they are a couple and they've been together for X amount of years and all of that. And, they invited us together on those, platforms, and nobody flinched, deny, or anything of that sort. So for us, it was very welcoming, right? So they took that huge step of inviting me and meeting me, us meeting their parents, and they were super fine and comfortable, and they said, what, we don't bother with what other people think. We want you to be a part of the celebration. So I think that was something which made us feel, and we were holding hands and celebrating and just being like another couple out there. And yeah, instances where we didn't get along well as well, which was very common, which is a very common thing, right? So for us, being allowing us to be in that space to be ourselves and acknowledging that, and celebrating that, was something that we would cherish for our lifetime. But also, I think I put this story out there a lot more is because I want more cisgender heterosexual couples or people out there to step forward, and this is how you make it a safe space, and this is how you make a conversation. Because many people who were in the closet also later came out and spoke to us and said that, who were there in that wedding, and said, it's really nice to see, and we are inspired and motivated that probably we will also be in this space. So it is it has its ripple effect, though we may not see it is
Yes.
underlying, because being queer or coming out is another personal journey. But seeing that
Mm.
hope and seeing that opportunity that this can be for me as well, I think is a big. So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that personal story. And Mihir, would you like to add how you believe allies can support?
So I would say maybe to take a step back, and I find particularly more so in the West, but also here, that a lot of social activity and gatherings are around coupledom and marriages. And so, when you go out in the evening, you go out with your spouse and you invite everybody else with their spouses. And so, in that sense, you kind of automatically start to exclude people who are unmarried or cannot get married. And I think that's an acknowledgement that's very important, because there's a lot of loneliness and isolation we've already experienced growing up, and coming to terms with ourselves. And then, so as you kind of go in and you're still not fitting within the kind of rubric of social structures, it can be very exclusionary. And so I think acknowledging that people live within different familial structures, and being open and inviting towards those structures, and not insisting on one type of kind of relationship as a central kind of way in which you invite others in. It's a kind of simple fact that, even in India, your relationships may not be seen as valid within your family
Right.
till you're married or you're engaged, right? And so here we can't get married. And so if you wait till that point, none of your partners will ever be seen as legitimate. So I think questioning oneself of, what is a norm is very crucial to being an ally here.
Thank you so much for that. And I already see questions coming in. So before I get to those questions, I'm just going to, invite both of you. What would be your one Pride Month message to all those listening in before I get to the questions that have come from the audience?
um, Pride Month message, I think, to people from the community: hang in there. There is hope, but keep the battles, going on in whatever way possible that you can. Take care of your mental health, most important. If you can't fight, that's okay. Take care of yourself. And to all our allies out there, I keep saying this. It's time for you all to come out of your closets and show your support vocally and in the open, right? Not just on social medias, but step out in places where it's really required. If you see any harassment, try and step in, again keeping in mind the safety of yourself as well. But if not, tell people, get some help, and try and see how much you can really put in your efforts on those. So yeah, that is my message to our allies also out there.
Thank you, Suresh. Mihir?
So my message is actually just to organizations, with good intentions, wanting to be inclusive, but may not know how. I think the way to start is just to listen to the queer employees that you have, and really kind of modify your structures and policies to make sure that the employment space is a safe space. Employment is very, very crucial to people from the community to be able to access their rights and be themselves, because a lot of the traditional support structures are not available to them. Their families may not be on good terms with them. So if they lose their jobs, it's many more consequences to follow than someone might assume. And so, therefore, there's a lot of fear about coming out and being yourself within the workplace. And so, it means a lot when a workplace is really safe. And so, to be able to listen openly and modify the environment, I think that is very crucial, much more than having rainbow taxis on a map or uh, branding, etc. I think that would be my message.
Thank you so much, Mihir. Both messages very well received, and I see questions from the audience. I think the first one I'm going to take first to Mihir, and then Suresh, if you'd like to comment, you're welcome as well. Um, so I think one of the questions is, how does recognition of same-sex marriage impact corporate India? So hopefully some of the answers were in that direction. But if there is a specific answer to say, what does corporate India even have to do with this? What would you say?
Is that for me? Oh,
Yes,
sorry.
Mihir.
Oh, for me.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So I look. whether you like it or not, you will have people from the community in your office. You will have people from the community you're dealing with, and then you will have people from the community who are in the ecosystem of your business and your organization. And I think it's incumbent on each organization to make sure that they acknowledge that people from different backgrounds come into the space and that they're safe. So that's sort of one kind of a broader consideration. I think two, where your organization kind of guarantees safety and freedom within the organization, you have employees and staff being able to function at a much freer level and being able to contribute to the business of the organization and develop it and take it forward. That is a very central kind of goal that you should have as an organization in any case. I think three, it also allows you to plug into a global system, which many countries and many organizations which work in different jurisdictions have kind of taken forward their policies and their practices towards people from the queer community. And so, if your organization based in India has kind of thought about it, I think that ability to interact and interface with different organizations kind of makes it more easy. And last, I would say is that there are legal obligations already. For example, with respect to trans individuals, you have to have an equal opportunity policy. You have to modify certain structures and policies. Already, there is an obligation, which is the law passed by Parliament, and there are rules under it, which one now has to take concrete steps. So it's not that the legal obligations are far behind, and I hope that marriage is also recognized. But I think it makes business sense, but it's also an obligation in terms of law to make sure that your organization is a safe space. Of course, it's not an obligation yet to recognize same-sex couples. That's something that's still sort of optional, and it's hopefully will follow from the Supreme Court decision.
Yes, yes. Fingers crossed. Suresh, is there anything you'd like to add in terms of how this recognition impacts corporate India?
Um, See, for me, I think if this recognition happens, then there is a lot of, openness, acceptance that is going to be coming in, right? If corporations and organizations starts acknowledging any and every type of relationship, then in the work that we're doing in diversity, equity, inclusion, that talks about diversity, that talks about equitable space, and even inclusive spaces, right? So which just makes it a lot more easier, a lot more better for an individual to be their authentic selves, which will enable them to
Suresh, we lost you there for us.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes. Just the last couple
Yeah.
of seconds.
So I was just saying that, I was just thinking through on what are the, impact or the ripple effect that's going to really have if, corporate India also goes ahead and starts accepting, acknowledging in their own way, right?
Yeah,
Be it in anything
yeah.
that they can do. So they can just take that forward and start having those conversations, and you will have a lot more benefits with having
Yeah,
such a diverse population.
yeah. And I think there's a connected question from the audience that says, have there been any notable examples of Indian companies publicly supporting or advocating for same-sex marriage? I think everybody's looking at who's going to take that first step and which organization, which big corporate is going to put itself out there in advocacy, in support. So, are there any examples? Because right now everybody's just being a little bit safe, and maybe rightly so.
None come to mind, at least
Yeah.
to my knowledge, because I also think that uh, traditionally we are, and I think rightfully so, careful about commenting on issues which are being deliberated by a court. So the silence on its own may not be read as a lack of support. Of course, it is concerning, but I think I do also understand that kind of balance. You know,
Right.
there is a concern that, and the courts also prefer it, that whatever is being discussed in court is not necessarily subject to a full blown public discussion. So I must say here we had a lot of discussion all over the newspaper, etc. But
Yeah.
because it's a big issue, but ordinarily people would be quite careful about commenting on issues that are being litigated.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, and another question, probably similar, is to say that same sex marriage is still a taboo or unacceptable, element, so to say, in our country. Do you think managers in corporate are that mature to allow gay couples to be a part of their teams? We always pass loose comments. It could be a transgender or an LGBTQ plus employee. As a society, we have not accepted the same sex marriage yet. How can corporates sort of accept this norm? So that's the question. Any of you can go ahead and
It's
respond.
a it's a journey, I would say.
Hmm.
For them. So that's why I kind of spoke previously also. I think the fact that about sensitization is so key. It's just not a one time thing, it has to happen continuously and ongoing, right? So for me, the point is you do as much sensitization as you can, bring in as many diverse people as possible so that people get to see, hear the stories. I think storytelling is a great form of even getting to make people understand that, right? Also, the fact is, it's not about just accepting. For me, I think the point is about it's okay even if you don't want to accept, but then can you just respect them and treat them for who they are as individuals, right? For whatever, whoever they are, right? So, what kind of relationships they have, be it even like this, heterosexual live in relationships are frowned upon, right? If you look at it from
Right,
that
right.
angle, also, still, though the Supreme Court has gone ahead and given them that recognition, right?
Yeah.
But then still, it is frowned upon. It takes
Hmm.
time to get into
Hmm.
that, acceptance and then go into being normalizing it, if I may say, in the form of
Hmm.
just saying that okay, fair enough, all right, they're in a live-in relationship and things like that. It will take time. It's not that it's going to go ahead and be an overnight journey, but having a law to help and support to change that
Yes.
narrative also definitely helps, right? Or even
Yes.
that support system, that be it an organization, be it an ally who's providing that, gives it a space to take the conversation further and bring more awareness about these issues.
Yeah. And I think sometimes we also underestimate our managers and employees to say they may not accept, but they might actually surprise us because the world around them is also changing so much. And for all you know, they might not be as tough as we would have, or as resisting as we would have imagined. So, yeah.
you know yeah, I'm very optimistic with the fact that a lot of work is going on in the form of sensitization, of bringing that awareness about not only LGBTQ plus people, wide range, right, of diverse people, underrepresented minority communities in specific to be talking about. And then you can see the human side coming out. For some reasons, it was not out there, but when you have those one-on-one conversations with them, or after a session, after a
Hmm.
conversation or a workshop, you do see that, hey, you know what, this is something that I really want to do. Is
Yeah.
everybody in? No. Is everybody against it? Definitely not. Is that a journey? Yes. Has somebody
Hmm.
been impacted? Is there been for me, I think it's always a shift in the needle, right? Has it at least
Hmm.
shifted one level further,
Right.
right? If that is
Right.
done, then yes, it will take time because, like, I mean, we
Yeah.
don't like change, but change is the only constant, right?
Yeah.
As individuals, we don't like that, but it puts us in a very discomforting or discomfortable
Hmm.
position. But a lot of them want to go through that because they see, or they are being futuristic about the fact that, hey, you know what, I may be there, or somebody close to me is going through that situation, and how is it that I can be there for them?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Sure. And I think a connected question that I see from the audience is how do you initiate a conversation and listen to a queer employee in terms of not offending and getting genuine feedback? Because I think there's so many parallel feedback streams that are going on in an organization. And, I'm sure there are certain nuances when you're engaging with the queer community in order to gain authentic, actionable feedback. So, both of you are free to comment on what do you think we should be doing around that.
Meher, you want to go first? Well, I've been answering questions.
Mia, do you want to jump in
No,
here?
I'm happy to go. I can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, Mihir.
Okay,
So,
sorry, there's a bit of
yeah,
a lag. So basically, I wanted to say, um,
we can hear you, Mihir.
people will basically be able to share their experiences if they feel safe. And I think
Right.
so. Ruchira, I totally agree with that. We don't need to necessarily underestimate our managers. So if there are personal bonds, I also think that there's a great hope that I have from leadership sometimes that one person can change many cultural aspects of an organization. And we've seen that even in more traditional institutions like our courts, one or two judges have been open to change and listening and have gone through very different processes. Um, so that's one. I think the second thing is that there's also the ability to bring in people from the outside to start the conversation. And
Yeah.
I had this very interesting experience where quite a few years ago now, we were called just to kind of help and advise the ERG. And actually, we realized that everybody was saying that they were an ally. And only when we were in the meeting did another queer individual feel safe enough to come out. And that was the first time he
Yeah.
came out to everybody.
Yeah.
And so, just having an ERG may not, even that might not be sufficient to enable somebody to feel safe. But having another outsider, another queer person who will not face negative consequences of
Yeah.
being out in that organization. So I as a lawyer, I at max stand to lose like a consultancy. It's not such a big deal for me, but that gave the assurance to the other individual to be out in that meeting. And so I think it's not easy. So I understand the
Yeah.
concern behind the question here because you don't want to sound condescending and you don't want to say, "Hey, come out and tell me,"
Yeah.
out yourself, and then we'll be able to have a conversation. But there are ways to do it carefully.
I think also to add on to what Mir said is like, for me, I personally think that ERGs do play an important role. If it's not there, then kickstart one, right? I think because you are in that learning journey, right? Moment you set up an ERG for the LGBTQ plus community people, which means that the intent is to learn, understand more about the community. And like what Mir said, bring in more people from outside so that they can share their stories and that conversation can pick on, right? Be it books or be it movies. That is another very great way of, going ahead and starting a conversation if you feel that you really don't know something and questioning or having a conversation with queer employees. I mean, we don't really know if they're out there, and we all know if it's a safe space or not. If it's not a safe space, trust me, everybody who is from the queer community, LGBT community, will not come out. We will go ahead, be in our closets, and
Sure.
try another safe space, right? So be mindful of the language that you have, right? When you talk also about another person, are you putting them, are you giving them that respect and not demeaning them? So it's all even with your own language as such. We also do understand how that is, right? So I would look at how other people are having a conversation and saying, is that going to be a safe
Sure.
space for me to be in? Right? If
Yeah.
it's not, then I'm
Yeah.
not. So watch, the
The
conversation that you have
language and
with your people as well. Yeah.
sure. Thank you. And the last question that I'm going to bring to me here, and we might have just about time to sign off post that, but it's an important question, so I don't want to let that go. Is what are the various outcomes that can come out of the ongoing case in the Honorable Supreme Court? If not the right to marry, what are the other outcomes that one can expect? So yeah,
Okay, this is a tough question, Harish, because you kind of need me to put my fortune telling hat on, but I will take a shot at it. So there are many layers to this because I can only guess based on what questions were put to us. And I think at the kind of end of one spectrum is that the court completely says that they are not going to get into it and they leave it to Parliament. So that's something we hope is not going to happen, but it might very well happen. And that's one of the central arguments that the government raised. The Other possibilities are that the court says that yes, there is a constitutional right to marry, but the Special Marriage Act, the way it's framed and its very messy connections to other laws, is not something that we are willing to touch. So you have a broader constitutional right, but how you actually get married, the government has to sort out. So that's one thing that we think might happen. There were some parties who felt that maybe the court needed to be shown other direction. So you had certain arguments being put forth by some of the parties which said that maybe in the interim there can be an agreement akin to sort of a civil union, though actually we already have a secular law under the Special Marriage Act. So we had one party specifically, it's not a party that I agree with, but I'm just putting it forth as one option that might come, which asked for registration of agreements between the parties. Now, I think that's a fairly messy thing. It's not a solution, to be honest, but it's also on the table with the court.
All right, thank you. So I'm guessing that's all that we have time for. But I can only thank both the panelists genuinely from my heart for such an authentic, such an insightful discussion. I am taking away so many learnings. And I believe everyone listening in will walk away with a more informed perspective and a stronger sense of allyship. So thank you, Mihir. Thank you, Suresh. And have a great rest of the evening, everyone.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.